Howdy, everyone. So I've been working on vinyl on this cowling, and it is quite the challenge. So I have the white vinyl completed on the underneath. Let me move this out of the way. Hold on a second. Let me move this. So this is the white vinyl underneath the cowling. And the cowling is a complex shape, right? It's got concave, convex curves. It's got multiple curves at the same time in multiple directions. It's just, it's a very shapely piece, right? So getting vinyl to play nice against these multiple curves is a challenge, to say the least. It's doable, obviously, because here it is, but it's a challenge, and it's not what I would consider pretty, and it's definitely not what I would call ideal. So the blue tape that you see is, again, where I have a seam here. And in order to get this piece of vinyl to lay on top of this piece of vinyl, I need to get the protective cap out of the way. I don't want this piece of vinyl to overlap the protective cap, because then I'll never get this off. So wherever you see blue tape is where I have taken the protective cap and rolled it back and then taped it down so it stays in place out of the way. So now this is bare vinyl with no cap on it, and this vinyl can go ahead and stick right to it. And you can see there's a seam here. So in a nutshell, wherever you see blue tape, there's a seam. So these blue pieces of tape roughly outline the individual pieces of vinyl that I had to cut to get it to lay flat and to get it to contour the curves really nice and not have any kind of a crease or anything of that nature. So this piece is made up of, as you can see, multiple smaller pieces of vinyl. So there are a butt-ton load of seams on this. And it looks worse than it actually is, because you have the actual seam of the vinyl, and then you have what looks like another seam where I have this vinyl protective cap pulled down. So this is just a single seam. There are not two seams here. So it's a little unnerving, if you will. But again, multiple pieces of vinyl to get this cowling covered. You can see here underneath this gray piece, this is like a triangle piece of vinyl. You can see a seam here with my pinky finger and a seam here. And then, of course, there's the seam here where the gray is going to overlap. So I did what I could with what I had, and that includes my limited knowledge of vinyl, but I did what I could, and this is the end result. Now, of course, I'd like to think that this is going to look better when all the blue tape is gone and the protective cap is removed, but the seams are still going to be there. There's a seam right here. There's a seam that runs down here. Here's another one. Here's another one. A couple things that I tried to do. So to make this not look so patchy with the seams, I tried to make the seams as long and continuous as possible. So here's an example. There's a piece of vinyl here. There's another piece here. There's another piece here. And then there's this piece. I could have potentially made this piece a little bit longer, this piece maybe a little bit shorter, but this long seam here would have been more jagged, and it would have been more like a sawtooth, not a sawtooth, but a square wave, square tooth look. And I thought that would make it look even more cut up and even more blotchy. So even though I was using individual pieces, I tried to continue the seams as long as possible. So this is a seam, a long seam here all the way across the bottom, but it incorporates multiple small pieces. Same with this seam. There's a seam here that runs down, but it again incorporates multiple pieces. So I did that as best I could. The problem is when you get into these compound curves, it's almost impossible to do that just because the individual pieces on that compound curve are going to be small. And in order to have continuous seams, you would either have to do a lot of really tiny pieces to run that seam all the way down, or you would have to go with larger pieces and have. So let me give you an example of what I'm dealing with here. And again, of course, if you've been watching these videos, this is my first shot at vinyl. I am not a professional. I don't know all the tips and tricks, right? I'm just walking through this, doing it the way that makes sense to me. So take that for what it's worth, which isn't really much. So this is the big panel on the front of the cowling, the gray that I just put on. You can see the cut tape underneath here, and of course this area in here is white. This will be cut off. I added a piece of cut tape. You can see it here. So there's a piece of cut tape underneath this corner piece. That will of course get cut eventually, and it will provide a nice straight line through here and an overlap on top of this piece. Actually, now that I think about it, I got to take this off because I did not pull back the protective cap. So this has to come off. And this piece will be trashed. I'll have to use a new piece, but that's okay because it's pretty small. But I just wanted to show this corner with the compound curve. You can see how the vinyl just isn't happy. I can't get these air bubbles out without making a crease. You can see it's starting to crinkle here as well. I have a nice seal on the tape, the cut tape here and along the bottom. But you can see, if I can get this camera working correctly, you can see that it's decent here and it's decent here as far as attaching to the fiberglass. Again, not happy up here and around this edge. So what I've been doing, I don't want a piece that's cut out like an L. To me, that doesn't make sense, and these jagged seams would look ugly. So since I have a rather large piece of flat, nicely adhered vinyl down here, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. I'm going to cut this straight across below this bubble, and then I'm going to cut it straight down before I get to this bubble. So I'm basically just going to cut out this smooth area right here. This piece of cut tape will take care of this edge. This cut tape here will take care of this bottom edge. So I only need to cut across the top and the bottom. Then this bubble stuff will go away. Then when I put a smaller piece here, it will probably, I hope, make this contour without these. Just because it's a smaller piece, it's not going to be fighting with this area down here. It's just going to want to lay around basically a single curve instead of a curve and a curve. That worked really well on the bottom when I did the white. I just kind of took an oversized piece. I made sure I had all my cut tape in place. Made sure to pull back the protective cap. I put that big piece on, and then I just started working it. And once it started to break free with these creases and these bubble areas, the wrinkles, once it started to do that, I would stop. And then I would just cut it out. And that seemed to work fair. I don't want to force these. You know, I could potentially force this one up a little bit and maybe get a bigger piece in here, but over time they work their way back down. And I don't want to cut this piece up in here and work these out, and then a couple minutes later they come back. So I want to make sure I stay well away from these wrinkle areas when I do my cuts. Now that's going to make this a very small piece, but like I said, I'm trying to do what I can with what I have. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out, and this will be done. And then I'll put a piece up here. Hopefully it will play nice and that will be done, and then I can just keep moving. And that's the way that it's going to have to be. These are probably just going to be pieces, parts all through here. So let's see. So I'm going to pull this piece out because I hooched the protective cap. I'll have to pull this off, pull the protective cap out of the way, tape it out of the way, and then start again with another piece. Another thing that I've realized while doing the vinyl, try to do it a couple of ways. Again, you don't want to peel it off and stick it back on and peel it off and stick it back on, because it won't stick as well every time you reapply it, right? It's not going to stick quite as good as that initial stick. And every time you do that, at least for me, I run the risk of getting dog hair on it and who knows what else. So I try to keep everything really clean, because you will see an individual hair. If you get a dog hair under here or a human hair underneath the vinyl, you'll see it and you'll feel it. So you don't want to get into the habit of sticking and removing. However, when you start on these curves and you start working these wrinkles and bubbles and stuff out, sometimes if you pull it back and attack it from a different angle, you'll be able to work those bubbles out completely. It may not look that way initially, but if you start getting into an area like this, potentially you could pull the vinyl back up to that area, and instead of attaching it in this direction, start maybe from underneath and come up this way. And a lot of times this will all go away. It just depends on how you attack it. This is not the case. I mean, this is huge. This isn't going to work out. I don't care what I do with it. So, okay, let me move on, and I'll get back to you guys here in a little bit.